Let's realize that it's not the fault of Gen Z for not being able to afford houses that our parents, if they were in our age group today, they would not be able to afford. And I know there is something to be said, and I've talked crap about Gen Z multiple times for, I think, a lack of work ethic that a lot of us possess. And I think a lot of it comes from like cell phone and social media addiction. I know I struggle with that.
Hey guys, and welcome back to Undoctrination. As you guys may have been able to tell, we pre-recorded the past 3 or 4 episodes, so it is my first week back in almost a month in the studio, and I'm so excited to get back in front of the camera, talk about things with Olivia. Obviously, we kept in touch while I was away, but I was in this magical country called Argentina, and it was incredible.
Please tell us a little bit about that, because we were keeping in touch while you were away, and I was reading your Twitter feed, and it just seemed like every day you were like, I ate this amazing food, and I saw this amazing village, and I went to this amazing place. So it just sounded so fun.
Yeah, so I definitely ate like way too much food. So I'm currently on a diet. But yeah, I went to Argentina with my boyfriend. We spent a month there, which is insane. I never did like study abroad or anything like that. So I've never really lived in like a different country for an extended period of time, and not to be like one of those girls that does study abroad, but it like literally changed my life. I'm such a different person now.
I was gonna say that you came back and you're like, oh yeah, when I went to Argentina, I'm like, okay,
Argentina.
Girl. Okay, all right, we get it. I'm just kidding.
In Buenos Aires.
Yeah, you're like an immigrant now.
Yeah, exactly. I'm basically an immigrant to the United States. So yeah, my world view has changed so much. It actually has. So usually when there is like a stereotype, it's because it's kind of true. So like the girls coming back from study abroad, when they're like, oh, my life changed, like my perspective shifted so much. Well, it probably did, because different countries have different cultures, and the United States is a very unique culture. And Argentina also has a very unique culture, kind of similar to the United States. Argentina is a nation of immigrants. And so right around the same time we were kind of getting started, Argentina was as well. Originally, there was some economic activity happening over there, but they had no workers after, I think, Spain invaded. And so they opened up their borders, and in came all of these Europeans. So the reason Argentina acts and looks like a European country is because they are like 96% European. And so there are a lot of just cultural elements that have been borrowed from that. It is mostly Italian and Spanish there. And so it's a very religious country. Well, maybe not religious. It's a very Catholic country and culturally Catholic, which is it's kind of similar to what I'm used to, because I'm from Louisiana, which is very French, and so it's also very culturally Catholic, but not extremely religious, like not big into the practice. Although the Catholicism there is very mystical. Like there are apparitions that happen there, and in
what way? What do you mean apparition? I'm not Catholic, so.
So there is an apparition of Mary. I'm trying to get this right. That appears to this one lady in Salta, which is a province in northwest Argentina that I visited, and it is a very spiritually rich and impactful part of the world. Like you're way up in the mountains, and there's like deserts and jungles and all of these kinds of things. And somewhere in the mountains of Argentina, there's a woman who sees Mary once a week. And so people from all over Argentina.
Once a week? Yeah. Okay. I thought an apparition was like it appeared like one time.
Yes. But for her, it's different. Which, like, for me as an American Catholic, when I was being told this, I was like, what? Like, we don't have that in America. And kind of that mysticism goes across a lot of religions in these parts of the world. Like, I don't know. Like, I feel like we've lost our flavor here. You know what I mean?
We lost a little bit of our spice.
We lost a little bit of our spice.
Yeah, because I guess like America overall, I would say is still culturally Christian for the most part.
But we're very like Protestant, you know?
Yeah, definitely for sure. And also when I mean culturally Christian, like obviously we like celebrate Easter and Christmas, but it's largely commercialized. It's not as mystic as what you're describing.
Very true.
Unless you
we
count
don't
Santa.
Literally believe that there is an Easter bunny that hops into our houses and delivers goodies.
Right.
Man, that is one thing I'm sad about with getting older is like you don't get the Easter bunny at Easter anymore, but then you fully understand the Jesus story, and that's powerful enough in and of itself. But either way, it was a very fun trip. I do want to do next week's episode on economic lessons from Argentina, because for those of you who haven't followed along with my journey, I've been tweeting about it a lot. Argentina is facing some of the craziest inflation in the world. Like, it's probably top 5. Their inflation currently is worse than Venezuela. To put it in perspective.
Why are we hearing about it as much as we hear about Venezuela, though? Because I feel like we hear so much about Venezuela. Obviously, we have a lot of economic migrants and refugees from Venezuela. I can't say that I know many Argentinian people in real life or people who have left due to economic reasons.
Right. Well, for one, there aren't that many Argentines. You know, it's like similar to how the United States has these, you know, pockets where there's a lot of people and then there's this like vast open land. It's even more like that in Argentina. So the majority of the country lives in Buenos Aires. Like, I think I'm probably going to get this wrong, but like 70% of the country.
Wow.
It's crazy.
Okay.
So the majority of the country is centered around its metropolis, which is where I was for about 3 weeks of the month that I was there. And then you venture out into the country and it's the most gorgeous, unbelievable thing you've ever seen, but there's not really a lot of people out there. Like, I was showing my roommate last night some pictures and she was like, it seems so empty. Like, it must have been really nice to be out there by yourself. And it totally was. Like, my head felt clear the minute I arrived in Tucumán, which is another province in northwest Argentina. But yeah, it's a crazy country. There's a sizable population in Buenos Aires. I think the reason we don't hear about Argentina much in the news is because it isn't as cut and dry, their economic problems, as simply being like, oh, this is a communist country, like, look at communism, you know, or, oh, this is a third world country. Argentina is very complex. It's very similar to the United States in its history and in the reason it's having problems, which is why I feel like it's a country we should pay attention to and we should tell the story, because it's so much more realistic of a situation than, say, Venezuela, right? It's way more realistic that Argentina will happen to us than Venezuela, in my opinion.
So when people are saying, oh my God, if we vote for Joe Biden, we're going to become Cuba, we're going to become Venezuela. That's probably not. I mean, it's a little fear-mongery, and I see exactly what people mean when they say stuff like that, but those countries are not really like us at all in a multitude of reasons. Right. But so I guess I'm getting is that people don't necessarily talk about Argentina as much, is because maybe the exact reasons and the issues aren't as digestible or like fear-mongery for a mass population, because it has to be, I guess, easy to understand, and it just simply isn't.
Like, I don't know how to say this, but like, communism is such a dirty word, and it's like, boom, communism, right? But like, boom, the central bank isn't like as, you know, shocking to people. But really the majority of Argentina's issues boiled down to a few things. There was a dictator that came into power, Juan Perón, and he wasn't your standard dictator, but he borrowed a lot of elements from other dictators in Europe. But he essentially used this like really effective type of populism that kept him in power for a very long time. And a lot of other people are now elected under the branch of Peronism, which isn't a real political ideology. So it's, again, not as cut and dry as like capitalism or socialism or communism. It's way more about like special interest groups and whatever it takes to stay in power. Right? Does this sound familiar? It sounds quite a lot like the United States and how politicians work here. So Peronism can be right-wing. It can be left-wing. It really just depends on what special interest groups you're pairing up with, which is very similar to how politicians here operate. They are very protectionist over there, so they ban the import of a lot of goods. So I was talking with a friend there, and he was like, yeah, we can't buy Nike shoes here. And I was like, but there's a Nike store, right? And he's like, yeah, we aren't allowed to buy shoes that are imported from other countries. Like, you just can't import them here. So all of their tennis shoes are like these crappy, you know, flimsy things that fall apart, and it's the same style in a bunch of different colors because only people in the country can make it. So next week, we'll talk a lot about that, hopefully. And of course, the inflationary crisis. Their central bank has been printing money like crazy because politicians can't stop spending money. Does that sound familiar? So essentially, their currency is just like crazy devalued. I was reading a study last night, I believe, in the 90s. They went through a political process to match the peso to the US dollar. So it was 1-to-1. And now the Argentine peso, the real value, not the fake value the government says, is worth about 470 pesos to $1 US. So, yeah, it's crazy.
So essentially I could go to Argentina and not spend a bunch of money.
Oh my girl. I went to the grocery store yesterday and spent $70 on like basics, not even stuff to make actual meals, just like lettuce for salads and like sparkling water and just basic stuff like that. $70. I almost passed out because every meal I was eating in Argentina was at like the nicest restaurant in this, like the nicest Italian restaurant. And oh, look, like all of this stuff, including a bottle of wine for dinner, is like less than $20 per person. Like everything is cut down quite a bit, except for clothing. I didn't get to go shopping. I couldn't like splurge on clothes because it's the same price as here and the quality's worse. But food,
interesting.
For Americans, man, it's a distorted economy. So not that I'm saying to take advantage. I would say they would appreciate your US dollars, you know?
Okay, I will go take advantage of that. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. But I was living like a queen, like an upper class queen for the month that I was there. And then I came back here and now I'm a peasant again because we have our own problems in America. And
let's talk about being peasants, because that's kind of the topic is our Generation Z, being a new surf class in America. Aren't we all excited, guys? Before we started recording, we were talking about how hard adulting is, and we kind of sound like millennials. We're like, hashtag adulting is so hard.
Guess what I did yesterday? I booked a doctor's appointment. Are you proud of me, Mom? Like,
yes, I am, because it's hard to live these days. And I saw this thread, or I guess a series of tweets that weren't in an exact thread, but from Mike Cernovich on Twitter. And I believe he's Generation X. And he was kind of talking about how boomers are essentially the first American generation to leave their children and descendants off worse than before. And I've mentioned this on this podcast, I think maybe even the last episode, but it's 100% true. And he's not saying it out of a place of hatred for his parents or for people in the older generation. But collectively, they have kind of screwed us over economically and culturally in many ways too, but specifically in terms of financially. And the people who were replying to his posts who were kind of mad that he made that generalization about baby boomers were saying, well, I bought a starter home for $9,000 and kids these days, this is a real tweet, kids these days just don't want to buy a starter home. They want to live like their parents are now.
The starter homes don't exist, babe. They're going for like $500,000 in Atlanta. Okay, I wish I could buy a starter home.
Right, like if you want to live in Detroit, Michigan, and buy a $1 house because they're all foreclosed upon and get shot up every day, sure, buy a house for less than $10,000. Please be my guest, But nobody, I mean, there's not even a lot of like, you couldn't buy a trailer in a trailer park for less than $10,000 in the majority of places. So let's be freaking for real for one moment. And just acknowledge that that's BFFR for one singular second. And also, two, let's realize that it's not the fault of Gen Z for not being able to afford houses that our parents, if they were in our age group today, they would not be able to afford. And I know there is something to be said, and I've talked crap about Gen Z multiple times for, I think, a lack of work ethic that a lot of us possess. And I think a lot of it comes from like cell phone and social media addiction. I know I struggle with that. And
I think our brains are just working differently.
Our brains are a little bit fried. And we were kind of, again, talking before we started recording about how phones and social media has reduced community and reduced human connection that inspires people to work hard and do things for other people and build something together. And now a lot of people aren't necessarily looking to build something together. They aren't necessarily looking to have a family, buy a home, live somewhere permanently and set your roots down. And so I think that's a whole other cultural problem, but specifically economically, the boomers were not sending their best, okay?
To be fair to the boomers, they are the first generation to do this, but they are not the last because
we're going to be way worse. We're going to be way worse.
Generation has made the same fatal mistake that the boomers did, which is to ask the government to come in and like solve problems, which generally doesn't tend to work. And for many different things, it has made the problem worse, specifically student loans, but
right. And so I hope this is not misinterpreted as a like dislike of people in that age group, because I know so many sweet old people. I'm sure that a lot of my followers, whenever I've done polls on who follows me on Twitter, at least half are Gen X and boomers. So I have I have like a large following of older people, which I like because they can see what I'm talking about. And usually they're not blind to it. They know what they did, honestly, and they know what they collectively have done. But like you said, this is not singling out boomers as in like this is the only generation that will ever do this or has ever done something like this. Gen X, millennials, Gen Z will ultimately show worse impacts on our children and our descendants.
Yeah, and I also want to add that, it might not even be that boomers I never want to assign collective blame for something that specific individuals did. Like it was the politicians, right? But yeah, I actually think my following is the reverse. I have more millennial and Gen Z followers because I can't stop tweeting about Taylor Swift.
My boomers followed me in like my MAGA days, so I don't know if I had to start Twitter over, they would follow me again, but I still have them holding on.
They've held on. That's so nice. That's so nice.
So I have a bunch of like kindly grandparents, like, oh, good job, Olivia. Like I literally, I remember I used to have people like trying to set me up with like their grandsons and stuff like on there. Like that's the type of people who follow me, who I love.
That's so sweet.
But you're right. I mean, you can't. I know you can't assign collective guilt because that's wrong. But on some level, you do get what you vote for. And I'm not saying that they knowingly voted, like, within the past 100 years. I'm not saying people knowingly voted and supported Social Security knowing it was going to be what it is today, or knowingly supported the regulation of healthcare knowing what it was going to be like today. And the same thing with like zoning laws and housing markets and endless spending that people, Democrats and Republicans in Congress have voted on. I don't think that they predicted that this would be the end result. So I don't think it was people like boomers and silent generation when voting had malintent for their children and grandchildren. That makes zero sense. But their main issue was trusting the government.
Right. And I think like hindsight is 2020. Like I can look at these decisions that were made and say, well, obviously, if you pass these laws to benefit a certain subgroup in the short term, it's going to have effects on other groups or people in the long term. But that's me saying that in hindsight. But I think what's worrying about our generation in particular is that we do have a lot of problems and we are facing a lot of economic problems. And we are kind of leaning even more into what previous generations did policy-wise, and what we're calling for, I think, would exacerbate these problems. But one thing that we don't think about enough is that Americans were actually really privileged to experience a lot of the benefits of having a free market. Like I don't think we've ever had a truly free market, but we've gotten pretty close. Yeah, we've gotten pretty close. And, older generations enjoyed a lot of the benefits of that. And I'm going to be honest, like after traveling to Argentina and seeing what it's really like to live and, in a country that's experiencing severe economic calamity, like we still have it really good here. So I do want to introduce kind of a hopeful element. Like things are actually not terrible, but here is what's troubling. Our parents did not experience this. Our parents experienced a time of serious economic prosperity, maybe not so much in the 70s, but they weren't dealing with this prospect of doing worse off than their parents did, right?
Until about 2008.
Yeah, but our generation has grown up through the financial crisis of 2008. We went through COVID lockdowns and now another economic recession. I was looking at the Fred data on housing prices. The average cost of a house in 2013 was $307,000, right? Roughly.
Okay.
Which makes sense, like thinking about maybe what our parents probably paid for their like normal sized houses. Like that's about right. The average price now, 10 years in the future, is $516,000.
See, you can't blame Gen Z's like whatever perceived lack of work ethic or lack of direction and community we have in life. That cannot all be blamed on us when that is a completely insurmountable amount of money for most people. Yeah. I mean, for that to be a 10-year difference. When we have not had a 10-year similar difference in like wages, for example, is, it's being kind of disingenuous to just be like, kids these days, they just don't want to work.
Yeah. And it genuinely, I think the main two factors, if I had to guess with just what I know, like inflation in general has gotten out of control because we've printed a lot of money in the past 10 years. Yeah. A lot of money. So the value of our dollar has decreased pretty dramatically. And there is something to be said about there maybe not being a big enough supply of these starter homes. And I think a lot of that has to do with regulation. And also housing got really expensive after COVID lockdowns. And a lot of that had to do with supply chains and construction sites shutting down. So you know, there are a lot of factors at work, and as per usual, a lot of them have to do with government intervention, right? But housing is a lot more unaffordable for people now. And I think it might have been the New York Times I saw today as I was just doing my morning Twitter scroll. I really need to stop doing that. But the New York Times had published something about how young graduates are no longer moving to these major cities and how housing prices have to do with that. And I believe that, like, Atlanta is getting expensive. It's getting very expensive. And just on a more personal note, like, I want to be in a house and like engaged, getting married, all of that stuff, like within the next few years. And after our conversation with Peter Jacobsen, go check out that episode. I don't have as high of hopes that the housing market is going to come down in a really significant way. It has come down a bit since 2021, 2022. Right. So if you just do a Zillow scroll, like the prices are dropping, but
the bursting bubble that we kind of expected, it seems like it's less and less likely to happen now.
Yeah. So it seems like the high costs are going to remain. I will say, like, I don't want to get too preachy about personal responsibility, but at least what I'm doing for me, I can't just decide because housing is expensive that I'm not going to pursue the life that I want. Like, I want a house. I want kids. Like, I want the life that I've wanted my entire life. So these things aren't going to necessarily stop me. But because Americans have grown up with such a prosperous country where we have all of this economic freedom, anything like this gets us really nervous. And we're just not, like, psychologically, the American psyche is not used to really disastrous things happening, right?
Yeah,
so when the wind blows, we like fall over, you know, which is why I think our generation is labeled as so sensitive, because just talking to people in Argentina where they've been like up and down, and they've dealt with really, really hyperinflation before, right. They're just used to dealing with bad things happening. And so their attitude is more like, well, that's just how it is, and I'm going to overcome it because I still want what I want, you know?
That's a great mindset to have. And it kind of reminds me of Peter, because Peter, he's not even 30. He's like 28 or something, right? He has a whole litter of children.
I know, it's
like,
so crazy.
It's still possible.
It's not crazy, it's goals, but
it's goals, but it's still crazy in this day and age when, like, obviously culturally, societally, there is a kind of an overwhelming at times, maybe not strictly antinatalist, but just like, why are you having that many kids? Like, people are fine if you have 1 or 2 kids, but once you cross over 4, people get rude. And I'm obviously not speaking from experience, but I've seen these comments on social media and weird comments that people have made to expectant mothers when they already have a handful of children. People are like, how are you affording this? Why do you need all this? The world is already overpopulated. People will try to be really negative about it and just tell you that it's impossible to have a big family. And, Peter and, several other people that I've been connected with now, a lot through politics, a lot of libertarians, they've proven that wrong.
Yeah. Maybe we should do a deep dive into this, but I just need to understand the psyche of the antinatalists. Like, what exactly about other people having a lot of children is upsetting? Is it jealousy? Is it genuine concern for the environment? I don't know.
It's weird because I think it's very much a first world problem, because there's 2 extremes. So in a lot of third world countries, in sub-Saharan Africa, for example, people have a lot of kids, and a lot of times it's based on survival. Depending on if your daughters can marry into a better family, if your sons can build a better business and take care of you when you're old, that literally, like, your survival or your lifestyle may depend on it. Here, and in a lot of, I think, European countries that also have similarly low birth rates, 1 or even less than 1 per woman, the narrative is like the world sucks. It's all going to crap. Don't bring a child into this world. It's making the environment worse. You can't afford it. Your life will be ruined. You know how many times that, especially like single moms and younger moms, but just in general, mothers and women are told your life will be ruined. Your body will be ruined.
Your life will
as a
change,
person will be ruined, and you are worthless now that you have a child. Like, this is what we're telling women.
Wall.
The dreaded wall. This is what we're telling women in Western countries. And then the people who are saying the wall, and I hate single moms, and I hate mothers, and women's bodies are wrecked, and their value has dropped after they have a child.
Yeah.
They're surprised when the birth rates drop, and they're surprised when women are a little bit more cautious to have children. And I'm not blaming that all on one factor. There's multiple factors that I just listed, societal pressure, but don't be surprised, essentially. And I think there needs to be some type of happy middle ground. Like, obviously, I don't think it's great to have kids just for the sake of it, or to have kids to ensure your own survival. But have kids because you want to, because you don't care what other people are going to think about it, because you know that your little family that you build is not negatively impacting the world. Like, the environment's not going to end. Species are not going to go in danger because you had 2 kids. Like, let's be FFR once again. Yeah.
We don't have to hate humanity. I think that's what it comes down to, is this idea that like humans and nature are inherently at odds. And I don't really think of it that way. Like, I think of it more like a multi-generational family. Like, the earth raised us and allowed us to become so successful and have all of this. Like, that's what the earth gave us. And like, we can care for the earth, but I don't like the inherently antagonistic relationship that a lot of environmentalists paint between
when we
us
even
and the
say it's like human versus nature or human versus the earth. I think that's going too far, because humans are part of nature. Humans are part of the earth. And humans are the only species that cares about the conservation of the earth as a whole, and the conservation of other species. You don't see whales conserving fish.
You don't see whales throwing cans of tomato juice at paintings.
Right. Right. And I was watching Whale Wars actually yesterday. That's why I brought up the whale analogy. But those people are crazy. You ever watch that show? Those people are crazy.
What is it?
Okay, so it's a reality show. I don't think it's even on anymore. It was essentially, it's about these anti-poachers who have this giant ship, and they go around in whaling, poaching waters. It's usually Japan that does this, because culturally they just they over poach and like eat a lot of whale, I guess. And it's a literal war. Like, they will board these ships and like
and go to war with the whales.
They've been like, going to war with the poachers, like the American. I don't even know if they're all American, but the crew like follows like this group of people who is like literally like they will ram into and like sink Japanese whaling ships. No, do whales give a crap about us?
That's a TV show? What?
Yes, watch Whale Wars. But that's just an example of the lengths that people
of the Caribbean?
It is very much like, if you like pirate vibes and conservation and reality TV all wrapped into one, watch Whale Wars.
Call ACC. I've got a show for them.
But like, they've been like shot at by these like Japanese whaling ships, and I'm like,
that is unreal.
No other animal is going through this amount of trouble to preserve an animal that they're not even eating or necessarily benefiting from. It's just to protect the ecosystem and to protect the sacredness of the species that's being overkilled. And obviously on the flip side, yes, it is obviously on the flip side, it is humans who are over poaching and over whaling, but we also care about invasive species and endangered species that really have very little to do with human conflict and intervention, and we protect them as well. And I just, I appreciate humanity for that.
I heart humanity.
Shout out to the humans.
Shout out.
Shout out to all my humans.
But yeah, getting back to family. So that I did want to bring this up. So in Argentina, I noticed, this is going to sound ridiculous. You go outside. I mean, it's a walkable city. It's amazing. I love walkability. Now I'm totally yemby pilled about walkability at this point. But there are like very old people everywhere, right? They're in society. They're walking around. They're at the grocery stores, at the cafes on your corner. You know, you see older people everywhere. People don't really do the whole nursing home thing there. And Argentina very much embraces, for the most part, I mean, every family's different, but a lot of people there embrace the multi-generational family structure. And this definitely ties into what I think is part of the problem going on with young people here. And, you know, bear with me here. In a multi-generational family structure, the United States embraced the nuclear family unit quite a long time ago, where it's just the mom, the dad, and the kids, and that's your family structure. In the multi-generational family structure, the whole generational family tree is very close. The parents take care of the children, the grandparents take care of the children, the parents take care of the grandparents. Like, there is a spider web being woven between different generations, cousins, all of that kind of stuff. I love my boyfriend's family because they are so close. Like, they regularly get together for asados and like cook together, eat together. Whenever something happens, it's like zoom, the whole family like comes like a spider web to support the person that's not doing great or going through something, right? And I don't feel like I've really seen that very often in the United States. Again, every family is different. So some families do choose to embrace the multi-generational family structure, but I've found that tends to be immigrant families, right? Who bring that culture over from where they were and bring it to the United States. And yes, there are issues associated with that, right? Like, your family is always in your business, but I kind of love that because you have both a support structure and an accountability structure to make good decisions. Like, you have all of these people to live for, to make proud, and it does help people to make better life decisions. And like, I just feel like our generation, at least me and people that I know, are so disconnected from their families. Like, I genuinely, in the past year, I've grown really close in my friendships, but I feel like I've neglected my family. And we're all kind of all over the map. Everyone's moving to different places. And it's just hard to feel steady and stable when you don't have this really large built-in support network, you know? And I feel like a lot of people are feeling that way.
I do relate to that a lot. And growing up, I was always jealous of my friends who had a big family, because I don't. I have no first cousins. I have one uncle. So I didn't grow, like, I have two siblings I grew up with, so I'm grateful for that. I think I would have been miserable if I was the only child. However, I like long and crave for like a large extended family. Especially like when I've hung out with my friends and their cousins, and I see how they're like siblings, but also like best friends. And it seems like just a great dynamic. And it's interesting because, my dad actually has like an array, like probably like 100 cousins, because both of his parents had at least 8 or 9 siblings. And then those siblings all had like, 4 or 5 kids. So there's a lot of cousins on that side, but we don't live in the same city, and they're like, second cousins or first cousin once removed or however it is. So it's like not the same. And I don't know if I crave to have like a lot of kids. I don't know what a lot is considered today. I would say like 3 or 4 would be my goal.
Yeah.
Which I think that is kind of considered a lot today, considering the average is less than 2. I think now it's like 1.5.
That's crazy. Yeah. I mean, looking at this beautiful multi-generational family that's just so, like, they're so full of love, Olivia. It's crazy. Like, I assume they have their little arguments. Like, in every relationship, you have that. But it is like such a strong support network. And I was going to Argentina and looking at the inflationary crisis. Did you know that 50% of their country is below the poverty line? Like, maybe it's like 40 something percent, but over half of children are below the poverty line. And inflation makes it impossible to save. So how are you going to buy a house in Argentina? You're not. Who cares, right? They have family there. And I couldn't fathom of how like people keep spirit about them. Like, how does that even happen when like things are so dark around you? And then I went and met all of these people and asked questions and observed how their culture is. And it's like, I get it now. That every person there has this like social network, this support network. And that's what keeps people afloat. Like, that's what gets you through the hard times. Americans are uniquely lonely. Like, I genuinely believe that more and more every day. Like, we are uniquely lonely people. We move away from cities. We move away from our parents. We go out into the suburbs. We try to get as much space as humanly possible for ourselves and our families. And we isolate ourselves. And you know, I think part of that has to do with increasingly abdicating our responsibility for each other to the government, because that seems like easier, I guess. I don't know. We ask the government to step in a lot of ways, including with welfare programs. And
we want the government to be our mom and dad.
Well, it makes us feel less responsible for other people, right? Like, you don't have to help out the guy in your community who's struggling because he can just go on unemployment or, you know, do whatever. So like, increasingly we feel like we're already doing enough by paying our taxes.
Right. And also the amount of taxes that we pay, which for a lot of people is over 40%, you know, how much money do you even have left over for charity and donating privately?
I don't. Like, I'm trying to save, you know, like I need to pay for my stuff. So it's hard.
I feel, sometimes I feel bad about it. So I'll like donate to like a random GoFundMe or some stuff. Like I'll donate to GoFundMes. But yeah, it is hard to, I still feel the need to help people and be charitable. It's hard to afford that these days.
Yeah, honestly. But yeah,
and also I was going to say I relate to the lonely feeling. I don't know if I'm unique in this, probably not, because I know a lot of people, especially when they're young, they have like their kind of coming of age moment and they want to be independent. They want to move across the country, or they want to do something. They want to do something by themselves. And I'm kind of in that moment right now. But at the same time, I do still long for a stronger community, if that makes sense. Like I don't know. I have a weird family dynamic, and we've both talked about our family dynamics like in private and stuff before. But to not give too much detail to people who are listening, I'm just not that close with my family. And it's not like there's like a lot of beef, but my life is very compartmentalized, and there's just a lot of things I don't talk about, and there's a lot of unspoken stuff that nobody talks about in our family. And so I do long for communication and connection with people. I think that's why I want to have a family of my own, to kind of build that for myself. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think, I mean, I get it. Like, I completely understand the nuclear family structure, because like family can be really tough. And like, at least for me, I feel like I moved to Atlanta to kind of start fresh and everything. But an unfortunate side effect of moving away is that I kind of lost touch with my family a little bit. Like, I love my parents. I love my siblings. I don't talk to them nearly enough. Like, I just don't, you know? And like, it genuinely weighs on me. So when I say like, oh, we need to embrace family again, like, it's way more advice for myself, honestly. But I know that's something that I crave as well. And witnessing just such a beautifully tight-knit family in front of me, like, really, really impacted me in figuring out what I want to build too. So my boyfriend's grandma is very much the matriarch, right? And the two of them decided that they were going to build like a big family that was close. Like that was a choice, an active choice they made, right? And seeing all of the cousins, like this was only possible through having several kids and then those kids having kids and like encouraging this and their children. So it's just such a thing that I'm thinking about now is like, I'm not even thinking about how many kids I want. I'm thinking about how many grandkids I want, you know, like how many cousins are my grandkids going to have, you know? 'Cause I want not only to raise my kids in a good way, like raise them to be confident and all of that stuff, but I want them to feel the closeness of family and feel the social network through family. And you don't have to just do this with family. Like if you're like me and you can't see your family that much, because I just can't. My dad's moving to California. My mom's in the middle of nowhere in Louisiana now. Like she's on a farm, you know.
Love that for her.
Yeah. My siblings are in Baton Rouge. Like it's all over the map, right? If you can't see family all the time, and most of us can't, and even if you can, like building friendships, even though it is so freaking hard to get out of your shell, it has been one of the most fruitful and joyful things that has been in my life in the past year. And I genuinely feel like I've like developed better skills and become a better person and a more responsible person because I really had to push myself outside of my comfort zone and start saying yes to things when I moved here. And I was really intentional about building a solid friendship network.
I love that. I need to do that, honestly.
It's so hard.
It's so adulting. It's so hard to make friends as an adult. Like I'm literally becoming a millennial, guys.
It's just about being open.
It's so hard. And
our natural state is to like wall up and close off and be distrusting.
Dude, you don't even know like how severely that is an issue for me. Like I hate talking about stuff, which is funny because I have a podcast, but I hate talking about.
I know you're like that, but that's okay.
And people growing up, especially in high school and college, because it got worse as I got older, honestly. But people would always be like, "Are you okay?" Like when I'd be sitting there in class, I'd just be sitting there and being quiet, and people would really assume that something was wrong with me, and nothing was really wrong. I would just have nothing to say, nothing to add. Or maybe I did have something to say, but I didn't feel comfortable sharing it. And I think that, honestly, me having a Twitter and me doing like shows and media and stuff, it is forcing myself to be out of the box and be out of my comfort zone. But I've kind of expanded my comfort zone to allow talking to a camera because that's not that hard. You know, it's talking to people in person that I'm just like, oh my God, like why? Gosh. Literally, why do I have to do this? Yeah. But I have been intentional with taking steps out of my comfort zone lately. Yeah. So I'm trying to get better at that.
It's really hard to trust people. And I think that's one of the biggest barriers to friendship. Like it's hard to trust people and it's hard to trust ourselves. Like it's hard to trust that you're going to be someone that other people want to be around, right? At least it is for me. Like that's always what I've struggled with when it comes to making friends. Like I had the absolute worst social anxiety growing up. And I still have like pretty moderate social anxiety. Like I really think way too much about what other people are thinking, which is not good if you want to be online and have a lot of people responding to things you say, you know? But it just for me, like has like opening myself up, but to people that I've discerned are like trustworthy has been so helpful. And like, it's something that I'm still continuing to work on. But it's so, like, it has been so important for me to build a community out here in order to feel, like, even safe living in a place where my family isn't, you know?
Yeah, especially in a city like Atlanta. Yeah. Like, that's not necessarily the safest city in the country.
But I feel better because I know, like, I have this whole support network. Like, should anything go terribly, terribly wrong, like, I have a support network here that will come and be there for me if I really need it. And I know in my heart, like my family would do the same thing. And that like that social safety net that is disappearing or hanging on by a thread for a lot of people and was for me for a very long time. That helps me feel confident in taking risks that I need to take in order to have a successful future and build the life I want. And that's why it's like what I wanted to talk about today, the like disappearing social safety net. It's because like you need that social safety net in order to make any kind of radical decisions about your future, you know?
Right. And as the middle class really starts to, I mean, it has already started to disappear, but as it really quickly starts to disappear here, and more people than ever before are finding themselves below the poverty line. And there is like this line, I think It's Always Sunny, but basically a joke about how they've always been poor. Now there's a new class of poor people, right? And they don't know how to be poor. They don't know what to do. They're, you know, what you were saying about how a lot of people, like half the population of Argentina lives below the poverty line, but they have this huge, not a government safety net, but a social familial structure that acts as a safety net. And so a lot of people, when they see the inflation spiking, and they're just like, I'm still going to do me. Obviously there are, you know, things that can hinder people economically, but the mindset and the help that they get from their family kind of works against what the government is doing. As opposed to here, where we want the government to take care of us. We have a hyper individualist culture. It's kind of a rat race here. And that really doesn't serve the individual, that doesn't serve the family, that doesn't serve the community. And with all that I said about my family not necessarily being close to talk about stuff, I know that would still do anything for me. So I still, it's not like I'm like out on the streets or anything if there was an emergency. But yeah, it's important. It's so important.
Yeah. And I think one thing I started doing to try to change and like make myself open to meeting new people that I found were like, I had to be so discerning. I did move to a different city at one point in my young adulthood, and it went terribly wrong. And I was really young, right? And like I think you also have to be very discerning about the people that you choose to be around. And I leaned on my family really heavily during that time. Like I was driving 8.5 hours home in the middle of the night all the time on weekends. It was ridiculous. But yeah,
what age was
super
this?
discerning. I was 20 to 21.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was going to say like 19 to 20 was like the age where I had to really learn to discern, because I guess I was just too trusting of certain people, you know?
I was very naive and had a lot of misconceptions about the world. And like, if Maggie now went into that environment, like I would be like, ugh, like.
Also, that's
no.
okay. Like it's
You know?
it's okay to, and some people have to learn the hard way. Actually, most people have to learn the hard way, because you can be as smart as you want, or be as book smart as
I was
you
book
can
smart.
get.
I was not street smart at all.
You don't gain wisdom without a certain level of life experience. So even though I went through like a couple crappy times in my life, and actually probably more than a couple, but in general, I come out better from it, and I learn more, and I have more wisdom on what to do here, who to trust here, how to find out how to find out if you could trust people or who to trust. It's an important skill to have. And also, you know, in 2 years, whenever we may be listening back to this podcast, we'll probably be like, oh my God, that was so cringy. That was so naive to say. But, you know, it's okay, because this is about indoctrination. This is about unlearning the stuff that has kind of been shoved down our throats, the antinatalism, the anti-community, the pro-government, the trusting big daddy and mommy government to be our parents instead of being with our family. That's about unlearning that.
Yeah. And I did want to talk about kind of my journey with building that social network, because it's one thing to tell people to just like go make friends, you know, but like it was hard for me until it wasn't. Like there were many things I did to try to learn how to do that and learn how to become more discerning. But on the topic of like, you know, growing and learning from experiences, I definitely feel like I definitely have. I'm a way different person like every 6 months in terms of what I think and feel and how I operate in the world. But one thing that's really changed about me now that I'm 24 is that I know I have no freaking idea like what I'm doing. Like I know that
like
there's
true
so much
growth is knowing that you know nothing.
Yeah, I know that there's so much that it's like, I know I have to work on this. I know I have to work on this. This is something I have to get in order. I wasn't kidding about the doctor appointment that I was really proud of myself for booking because I'm like, oh my goodness, I have to be in my health era now. Like I have to take care of myself. If other people are going to rely on me, I have to take care of myself. It's like, I'm 24. I should have realized that at, I don't know, 18 years old when I became a legal adult, but that's not how these things work.
That's okay. I still had a pediatrician for like way too long, honestly, but
yes, work. We love our pediatricians.
Don't we, folks? But it's actually so right because sometimes I have a frequent habit of getting into like a Wikipedia like wormhole and like researching like a bunch of random stuff. And every time I find out something more, I have like 50 million more questions about how the world works. What do I do here? Yes. Why do I feel this way? And like the quest for knowledge is truly, in my view, it's like unquenchable. You could really never know
enough. Isn't it great though?
It is great. No, that's kind of inspiring to me. And it's also like, I'm now okay with knowing that I don't know everything. I never will, but all I can do is improve. And I think I know more than most people in our age group, unless, except for the people that listen to this podcast, you're also smart.
So true. Yeah. So true. Yes. Yeah. I don't know. When people say like, oh, you're so mature for your age, I'm like, no, I'm not. Like everyone I know my age is kind of on the same wavelength. Like we're all just,
I think maybe you've just surrounded yourself with better people than I have or have grew up around, honestly, because I constantly get told, and at first, and I don't know if I should be offended at this because at first I was, but like when I meet new people, they like often think I'm like 27, right? 26, 27, like, 28. I got 29 one time.
I need the injectables.
I got 29 one time and I was like, you do not think I'm pushing 30 years old, ma'am. Like, do you see this skin? I'm not 30, but.
Okay. A YouTuber, here's some tea. Okay. A YouTuber who has been falling out of popularity for being a grifter came for me on my confirmation day and was like, yet another 30-year-old who's like getting confirmed to like reverse all of this stuff. And I don't know. She like came for me and called me 30.
Basically acting like you hit the wall and now you're coming to God. Like, first of all, I know who you're talking about and she looks older than she is.
We're not going to talk about people's looks.
Hey, I didn't say who it was.
Listen,
I didn't say who it was.
No. She's beautiful. She's a child of God. But
right. You're a better person than me, Maggie. We've already established this.
Yes, I also get confused for being older, and it's always been that way my entire life. But while I was in Argentina, I might have had my quarter life crisis early and like started Googling like how to balance my hormones. Shout out to the 28 app. Like how am I going to lose weight so I can be, you know, looking good as I'm getting older. The one thing I'm not sold on is Botox. I don't know if that's going to be in my future yet because I am terrified of I'm terrified of surgery, Botox. I'm terrified of anything bad happening to my face. Like,
yeah,
that
you don't want to like not be able to raise your eyebrows or one of them's like stuck like in a weird position or some stuff.
Yeah, but I know so many people with like really nice like.
I've met people with Botox who you would not know they have Botox.
No, you'd have no idea, and they look amazing.
And I think what used to scare me about it was I thought it was the same thing as filler because filler is obviously like very noticeable. And
it's not.
No, Botox and filler are different.
I am realizing so many. I'm in my realizing
like
things
Botox
era.
is also a medical thing. So a lot of times people will get like injected Botox to do away with like chronic migraines. It's not a filler. It's like I couldn't explain to you in the best way because I don't know exactly what it is. I've never gotten it, but they're two different things. Like filler will like migrate throughout your face and sometimes makes your face look a little droopy.
Yeah.
Botox like literally tenses your muscles. So like when you raise your eyebrows, and I don't even have much of a line, but like that line would not be there.
I have so many lines on my face. I'm way too expressive. That's another thing I read during my quarter life crisis that I was having. It's like,
dude, my face is just chubby. That's why I don't see it.
Too expressive. And I was like, well, I'm
oh
screwed.
My God. Whatever.
So that's a great place to wrap. Please leave in the comments whether or not you think I should get Botox before I hit the wall.
Right. As we're talking about like how we can't afford to buy houses or have families, we're like, should we spend money on Botox? See, we're just naive little girls. And in 2 years, when I listen back to this podcast, I'll be like, no, we did not need Botox. No. We're in our early 20s. Yeah. Like, you totally don't need it.
I'm in my mid-20s. I'm accepting it. It's okay. Aging is cool. My roommate told me last night, she's like, I love that when people age, they stop caring as much about what other people think. Like, they just become more themselves. And I thought that was really nice.
I'm excited for that day.
So,
and I was just to make that note, I don't think there are no men in their 20s considering getting fillers or Botox. So I think there's something to be said for that. We have like this expectation that we're not supposed to look our age when we are that age.
It's okay. I have more things to offer than what I look like. So it's okay. Yeah.
It's all right.
Anyways, this has been a great episode. I'm so happy to be back and, doing podcasts again and spewing my little thoughts all over the internet. That's just so much fun.
I love spewing.
You, Olivia.
Yeah.
Olivia, where can we follow you?
I am on Twitter at Rondeau Olivia. It's RONDEAULIVIA. And on Instagram at Rondeau.Olivia.
And I am on Twitter at Liberty Anders. Please make sure to like, subscribe, hit the bell for notifications, leave a comment. And I can't wait to see you guys next week and talk all about Argentina. I promise you, it's super, super interesting. You're going to want to stick around. All right. Bye, guys.
Bye.